In this video, we're going to talk about internal mastery as a high ticket closer. This is something that you absolutely need to know if you want to make a lot of money as a high ticket closer. If you develop internal mastery, you will be able to make more money, you'll be able to make more money more quickly, and you'll be able to make more money more easily. So more, quicker, and easier. That is what I would call the holy grail trifecta, or a win-win-win. If you don't know who I am, my name is Josh Lyons, and as a high ticket closer, I was able to earn over $100,000 per month in commission. And then I went on to train top sales teams in the industry like Alex Hormozi's Gym Launch sales team. All of my earnings and requests to train top sales teams in the industry came from equally developing both the internal as well as the external as a high ticket closer. Most high ticket closers are extremely underdeveloped when it comes to the internal side of things. And because of that, they are stuck way below their full income potential. But when you master the internal as well as the external, you absolutely can become a money printer as a high ticket closer, earning double or triple or even quadruple what the average high ticket closer earns. And at the very end, I'm going to tell you the quickest thing that you can implement today to start plugging your internal leaks as a high ticket closer. So let's crack in. What is internal mastery? Let's forget mastery for a second. It's also pretty self-explanatory. Let's just clarify internal. There's a number of different ways to think about this, and so I'll give you a handful of signposts and I'll give you a couple of different examples. First signpost is to understand the difference between inputs and outputs. In life, everything is like an equation with inputs on one side and outputs on the other side. In sales, the outputs would be what do you say, how do you say it, and when do you say it on the phone. Now, what determines that? You might say sales training. Sure, but what actually determines that you went and got more sales training? You don't just wake up one day and decide, I'm just going to go and do sales training. The internal or the inputs are what created that reality where you went and did more sales training so that you then did say the right things in the right way at the right times on the phone and therefore earned more commission. So the first thing is to understand inputs versus outputs. The internal is always the inputs, the external is the outputs. Second way to think about it is universal or generalized versus subject matter or specific. And so when we're looking at internal mastery, the internal is universal. It works across any different field, any different subject specific, or any different industry or any different area. So I'll give you a simple way to view this. Think of it like ingredients and a recipe. No matter what you're cooking in your recipe, it all is going to come from the same core ingredients. You can't change the core ingredients. You can only change how you put them together and which different ingredients you use. And that is going to give you a different outcome for the recipe. And so making this a little bit more human, when we think about something like what makes a champion in sport, for example, well, is it that they just were better at dribbling the basketball? Or is it that they were just better at shooting the basketball? Probably yes. But what determined that they became better at dribbling the basketball and that they became better at shooting the basketball? That would have been the universal character traits. Take, for example, Michael Jordan. Whilst he was very, very good at scoring hoops, it was his internal state of mind and his drive and his characteristics that allowed him to go on and become a legend. And so seeing the difference between universal versus subject matter is very easy to do when we look at changing the industries. So I'll give you an example. The same internal characteristics that would make someone a musical icon would be the same internal characteristics that would mean they could become a sports star. Those would also be the same traits that would mean they could go on and become a business prodigy. And so it doesn't matter which specific area or specific field or specific subject matter that we're looking at, the internal is universal across the top of that. Whereas if we just said, for example, I'm gonna get someone that's really, really good at dribbling basketballs. and I'm then going to go and throw them in business. Well, if all they're really good at is dribbling the basketball, that is not going to have any benefit to business. But if I said, I'm going to go and find someone that had a really, really, really good drive, and therefore they were good at basketball or dribbling the basketball, and then I'm going to move them into business, that's now transferable. So the internal is universal. The internal is also the input. That's kind of starting to give you some differences. Now, I said I'd give you some examples. One of the best examples for this is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Great inputs and great universal traits. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, because of his state of mind and his personal characteristics, his internal mastery, he was able to become a world-class bodybuilder. He was then able to become the highest paid movie star of the time, and then he went on to become the governor of California. So that's a great example. Another thing to understand with internal mastery is there's no excuses. And so it is transferable across industries. It's transferable across in high ticket selling, different offers. It's transferable across different ages of closers, different genders of closers, different backgrounds of closers, whereas everything else is specific. You know, it might be better for women or better for men or better for old people or better for younger people. But the internal mastery, it covers all of those different things equally. So that's what is internal mastery. Now, final couple of ways to think about this so it really sinks in for you is if you're really good at engineering, you're just really good at engineering. Whereas if you're really good at learning, you can then learn anything. And so which one would you rather? Would you rather be really good at engineering, or would you rather be really good at learning? Would you rather be really good at just selling one thing to one specific type of person, or would you rather be really good at mastering yourself and mastering life? That's the big question. Final example, this one's quite fun, is imagine that you had a magic lamp, and inside the magic lamp you had a genie, and the genie says, I'm going to grant you one wish. You have one specific wish. What would you wish for? Well, if you actually wished for one specific thing, for example, to be really good at sales, that's all you're going to get. Whereas thinking of the difference between internal and external would be like saying to the genie, I wish to have more wishes. Because remember, the internal is what? It's universal. It's transferable. It spans across anything. So you don't get one wish and you just, I really wish I closed this call today, or I really wish I closed this deal. Well, if you said, I wish to have more wishes, so that's the big secret. That is what internal mastery really is. So why is internal mastery so important as a high ticket closer? Well, there's two reasons that it's so important as a high ticket closer. Whenever you're looking at getting a result in life, you have two different variables. One is how much of the result you get. And so what does that mean? If you are a high ticket closer, it's like how much commission are you actually making? 10K a month, 20K a month, 30K a month. Think of this like if you were driving a car, let's say you had a Ferrari, the speed that the Ferrari is going is like your commission. That's how much money you're earning. If you want to make more commission, there's only so much you can increase the speed of the car until you have to change the engine. The engine is like the internal. The speed, the external, is your commission. And so there's a limit on how much you can change the outside without changing the inside. So internal mastery is so important because you're limited in how much you can actually get of your commissions until you actually fix the internal. The second reason that it's so important is how hard something is. In other words, the effort that you're putting in. Think of it like you're pouring water into a bucket, but the bucket has holes in it. Sure, you can keep refilling up the bucket with more and more and more water to keep it topped up. So, being topped up would be like saying, well, I'm still making the same amount of commission. Yes, but you're working a lot harder than you really need to be. You're wasting a lot of time. You're wasting a lot of effort because you have leaks in the bucket. Just like as a high ticket closer, you have internal leaks in you. You have two reasons that internal mastery is so important as a high ticket closer. One is how much, in other words, how limited you are in your earnings. And the second one is how hard, in other words, the effort that you're having to put in to get the result that you want. So how I learned internal mastery. There's a number of different ways that I learned it. The first way is from mistakes or having problems. So as a high ticket closer, what's your biggest problem? When you don't close. So every single time that I didn't close a deal, I would go back and I'd listen to the call a number of times, and I would ask myself, was it a problem with what I did on the phone? Like, I said the wrong thing, or I didn't say the right thing, or was it a problem with how I showed up, either to the call or sometimes even to life in general at the time? More often than not, it was a problem with me. So the first way that I learned internal mastery was just mistakes and having problems. Second way that I learned internal mastery was money. I'd invested as a high ticket closer into a mentor. And so every single time that I had a call that didn't close, I'd go and ask him questions. First question, what happened here? Second question, why did this happen? And so by investing that money into a mentor, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, I was then able to get answers. And when I would say, what happened? He would explain to me, well, you showed up like this and therefore this happened. I would then ask him why that happened. And he would start explaining to me these really important concepts that connected psychology, that connected human behavior, that connected spirituality. And he connected all of these things together and taught me through my investment in him why internal mastery was so critical to me getting the results that I actually wanted as a high ticket closer. The third way, how I learned internal mastery, was time. And so over the years as a high ticket closer, and even before then, I read well over 500 personal development books. And it took me a lot of time because for all the books I read, there was only ever a tiny, tiny little golden nugget between every 5 or 10 or sometimes 20 books that I was reading that was actually valuable and applicable and that I could implement and went and saw a result. And so sometimes I had to combine these little nuggets from, 50 different books in order to actually start developing internal mastery. Really, compared to having a mentor or compared to just learning the hard way through my mistakes, books were the least valuable, they were the least impactful, but it was just the time of how many years I spent reading and reading and reading. I did start to pick up a few little things along the way as far as internal mastery that I have used to this day, both for myself as a high ticket closer and for students that are inside my Unicorn Closer Mastermind. The fourth and final way that I learned internal mastery was through personal experience. Combining my experiences with the solutions that my mentor gave me, plus all of the books, I would then basically be a human guinea pig, and I would try things and I'd be like, oh, that worked, or oh, that didn't work, or oh, that worked really, really well. And I would start testing these things out to see what actually got me a result. Now, over 5 years, my mentor, who is decades ahead of me in finances and health and spirituality, he would give me these holy grail items that I could go and action, I could go and implement immediately, that would allow me to start reverse engineering any of my shortcomings when it came to internal mastery. That would then allow me to get ahead and actually get out in front of them before they actually happened. And so through that personal experience, I was then able to really start to understand what is internal mastery and how do I actually go about creating it and developing it. So I had mistakes, problems, I had money, I had time, and I had personal experience, both my own and the decades and decades and decades of experience that my mentor was handing down to me as well through that mentorship. So what are the 8 pillars of internal mastery as a high ticket closer? So I don't have time to get into all of the pillars in this video because inside my Unicorn Closer Mastermind, we spend at least 1 hour, sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours on each of these, going really deep. Because when you talk about the internal, given that it is an input, not an output, and given that it is universal, not just specifically relevant for one tiny thing, there is a lot to cover, especially when you want to master the internal side of things. So I'll just give you a few of the internal mastery pillars and just a little bit of an explanation of what they are and where they come from. If you want to really fix the internal side of things as a high ticket closer, there'll be a link either above or below this video, depending on where you're watching it, about my Unicorn Closer Mastermind. And the internal mastery is a huge part of what we do inside there, which is why we've been able to have such crazy results for high ticket closers. So 8 pillars of internal mastery. First one is going to be your self-awareness of your state. If you're in a bad state, you're going to bring that to the call. And when you bring a bad state to the call, you're either going to transfer that bad state to the prospect, or you're going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're in a bad mood, so bad things happen just because that's, the universe is a mirror and it's always listening. And so the first thing that you need to develop in terms of internal mastery is going to be awareness of your state, and then a way to actually put yourself into the right state. People like Tony Robbins, who I think last time I checked was worth like $500 million, maybe more. One of the things that he's a master of is getting into the right state. Everybody that's super successful has mastered being able to know what state they're in. Is it a state that's benefiting them? Is it a state that's serving them? Or is it a state that's not benefiting them and actually hindering their results? And then being able to change into a state that is actually going to get them what they want to accomplish. The second one is going to be your drive. If you don't have drive, as the saying goes, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, you're not going to get going. You're just going to quit. And so even if you're on a sales call and the prospect starts being a little bit difficult, if you don't have drive, if you don't have a reason that you're going to and need to push through, you'll back down, you'll run out of steam, you'll have no power, you'll have no energy. So drive is a massive one. And it's actually pretty difficult to create drive on your own, because we wake up some days and we're like, oh, I don't really want to do anything, or life's okay. Whereas when you're around the right people that are all playing at a higher level, and you've got a community of people that are all pushing their boundaries, it's easier to create drive because your environment now is creating it for you. You're like, oh my God, I'm looking to my right, I'm looking to my left, everybody's winning. I need to win. I have to do this. I have to get better. I have to improve. So that's another reason why if you join something like my Unicorn Closer Mastermind, we're all inside a community, posting wins, sharing wins, encouraging each other, and pushing each other forward as a collective, so that we've all got that drive every single day as a high ticket closer. Third one I'll give you is biology. So when it comes to internal mastery, I heard a phrase which is, you can't beat biology. If you're tired, if you're running out of energy at the end of your calls, you're on call number 7 for the day, or you're on Friday or Saturday for the week, and you've been going since Monday. If you run out of energy, if your biology is bad because you're dehydrated, you're not well fed, you're not sleeping properly, nothing that you try and learn as far as sales specific skills or sales specific training is actually going to matter if you're just exhausted and your biology is working against you rather than for you. Fourth and final one I'll give you is organization. So when we talk about internal mastery, even though this is internal, remember the connection between the internal and the external, or the inputs and the outputs. If you are disorganized in your life, in your environment, you will be disorganized in your mind. This stuff is a feedback loop. It connects together. If you're disorganized, when you show up to a call and you're trying to listen to the prospect, you're trying to tune in, you're trying to really understand what they're saying beneath or behind the words. If you're disorganized mentally because your life's a mess and you haven't actually got a proper way to organize yourself every single day, you're not going to be able to tune in. Things are going to be missed, and then you'll not close the deal. And just like I did, you'll then go back to the call. The prospect will say something. You'll think, oh, I need to say this. And you'll listen to yourself in the call not say that. And you'll be like, but I knew what to say. If you know what to say and you don't say it, is that an external problem? No, of course not. It's an internal problem. You had it inside of you, but something with your internal state of affairs was not lined up properly. And so you started behaving externally in the wrong ways and you weren't doing what you needed to do. So that's 4 out of the 8 pillars of internal mastery. Like I said, if it's something that you want to go really deep on and actually plug your internal leaks, there'll be a link somewhere below this video as far as learning more about my Unicorn Closer Mastermind, where we go very, very deep on plugging all of those things for high ticket closers. So next we're going to talk about how to assess your level of internal mastery as a high ticket closer. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to do a self audit. So I gave you 4 points, but you can think about what other areas of internal mastery you haven't developed and give yourself a score out of 10. Now, you got to be honest with yourself, and sometimes that is difficult to look in the mirror and admit that you're not really who you need to be, and therefore you're not where you want to be. But a self-audit and really getting an honest look at where you're currently at is always going to be the first step. Now, this is going to be more intuitive by asking yourself and having, a hard and honest self-assessment of yourself. Another thing that you can then do is look at your actual results and look at that compared to other performers on the team. Look at that compared to other people around you that maybe started closing at the same time of you, or that you look at them and you think, they're no more intelligent than me. And are you like the top of that generalized group, or are you not quite the top? Are you in the middle, or are you at the bottom? And so when we're talking about assessing your internal mastery, remember inputs versus outputs. If you're not getting the external results that you want, sure, you need to develop the external skills as well. But in order to develop those external skills, you need to have the right internal mastery. Quick and simple, do an audit of yourself, ask yourself some questions, cover some core areas, and give yourself a score out of 10. By the way, anything less than an 8, so like, a 9 or a 10 really, you are losing an obscene amount of money that you probably haven't even comprehended. For example, if you're making $20,000 and you're giving yourself a 7 across the board, you could easily be flushing another $20,000 per month down the drain every single month, because the internal, think of it like an iceberg. Most of the iceberg is under the water. The majority of your results comes from the internal, the inputs. Let's talk now about how to train internal mastery. So you've done an audit, you've done a self-assessment, you know where you're at. Maybe, if you're still watching this video, it's really not where you want it to be or where you need it to be. So as far as training your internal mastery, you have 2 options. First option is retroactively. And so that basically means trial and error. Every single time you're on a call and it doesn't close, it's because you made a mistake. Just like I did, but I was able to shortcut this a lot because I had a mentor and I'd invested in someone that was decades ahead of me that could point these things out and then give me the tools to get in front of those ever happening again. But ultimately for you, if that's not something that you want to do, trial and error. But you have to make a mistake and then track it. So every single time you don't close a call, you have to write down why. So go back through the call and ask yourself, am I in the right state? Was I organized? Was I driven, et cetera, et cetera. And then after you make the assessment, you then want to ask yourself, what are some potential solutions that I could install into my life in order to prevent that, or ideally minimize it as much as possible from happening ever again. So the first way to train your internal mastery or develop internal mastery is retroactively. Second way is proactively. Warren Buffett has a quote, which I believe he got from Charlie Munger, that says, you have to learn from mistakes, but nobody says that they have to be your own. So the second way that you can develop internal mastery is proactively, by actually learning from others' mistakes. For example, you could join my Unicorn Closer Mastermind. I've made the mistakes. My mentor made the mistakes decades ago. We've figured it out. We know what the mistakes are, when they occur, why they occur, and how to prevent them occurring as often, if not ever again, when you actually go through the program that we have for the internal mastery. That is actually the exact same program that I took Alex Hormozi's gym launch sales team through for internal mastery. And by doing that, I took them to their highest close rates in over a year. So how to train internal mastery, you've got either retroactively or you've got proactively. choice is yours. I then promised at the end of the video, I was going to give you the quickest thing that you can do today to start plugging your internal leaks as a high ticket closer. There's a great book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. Very, very simple concept. Instead of trying to do 10 things and your brain and your effort and your energy being scattered and diffuse and diluted, just focus on one thing. So you hopefully did an assessment before, or maybe you're going to go back and do that assessment after. When you then look at your sheet of paper, or you typed it on the computer, and you look at all the different things where you're losing money because of your internal mastery not being developed, you want to ask yourself, what is the one thing that I know is costing me sales more than any others on that list that I will commit to stopping doing? And just focus on that one thing. I promise you, if you just focus on one of these things and you actually commit and you actually dedicate to fixing one of your leaks, you will make more money. For some people, that could be binge eating. For some people, that could be having a messy room or a messy house. It could be drinking too much alcohol. It could actually also be drinking too much coffee. It could be smoking weed. It could be skipping the gym. It could be hanging around with people that are draining your energy, or a specific person that's draining your energy. Just pick one thing and make it 10% better. Anybody that tries to suggest you, write out a list and do 500 different things, that's not going to work very well. When it comes to internal mastery, just pick one thing that is the quickest thing that you can do today to start plugging your leaks in terms of your internal state of affairs. Final thing that I want to leave you with is a very important question. What is it costing you? I want you to think about that. What is it costing you? Imagine a reality where all other things kept the same. You were a 10 out of 10 for those first 4 pillars of internal mastery that I gave you before. We had state, being in the perfect state at all times. Drive. Every day you're driven. You just want to accomplish. Every single day you have great biology. You have energy. You can focus. Your biology is working for you. And then you are extremely organized both physically and mentally. Imagine if you were 10 out of 10. Imagine that reality. Now compare that to where you're at right now. What is the difference in what you think you would be earning? That is what it's costing you. Now, and that would be monthly. Now, I want you to divide that by 4. That is what it's costing you every single week that goes by that you don't develop your internal mastery. And so then my final question for you is, how much longer are you willing to flush that money that could be in your pockets down the toilet every single week because you haven't developed internal mastery as a high ticket closer? That is all for the video.